to Game Theorem, where we have serious discussions about absurd entertainment.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Kira.
So today's episode's going to be a bit weird. Because we're classifying this as like one of our deep dives where we go deep into a series, a fictional series or whatnot. And not one of the ones where we do like a million revisits of, right? But we're kind of treating it like a wide look anyway.
Yeah, because of the content of the game that we're discussing.
Yeah, so it's a kind of hybrid where basically we're not going to go deep into the lore of a specific game, in this case Cyberpunk 2077, because quite frankly, we don't really care about it. The lore, the story in the game, is really the secondary story to the story of the video game Cyberpunk 2077.
So we're doing a deep dive, not into Cyberpunk 2077, but into the wide look of Cyberpunk 2077.
Right. So it's effectively a wide look episode that we're just releasing when we would have released a deep dive, and it's about a specific game.
Which is why we didn't want to quote it.
Yes, that's why we didn't have a skit at the beginning either.
Yep.
So we want to say, first of all, if you enjoy playing Cyberpunk 2077, if you're one of the people that genuinely enjoys the game and really hates that it's become the center of so much controversy, it's understandable to enjoy problematic content. You know, they say there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, right?
Yeah.
However, it is important to recognize there's more ethical and less ethical.
The problem isn't your enjoyment of it. The problem is ignoring the problems with it.
Right. And where that line comes down is always a bit of a discussion. But we're going to talk about today about how unethical a game Cyberpunk 2077 was. For a multitude of reasons. And so if you get enjoyment out of the game, that's not bad. You can listen to earlier podcast episodes we have released, like the E3 episodes we used to do back when E3 was a thing. Where we looked forward to Cyberpunk 2077. Just the closer it came to the actual release date, the more and more let down and disappointed we were getting by all the marketing material. And then look what happened.
Yep.
We want to reach out to those people and say, like, look, we get it. It was a game we were looking forward to. But stuff happened, and the game we wanted is not the game we got. And that would probably go for you, too. Even if you enjoyed it, it's not the game that was sold. And even as the game was sold, was kind of messed up in a way. There were many things, like, basically, any fan of the cyberpunk genre will tell you that Cyberpunk 2077 should not be called Cyberpunk. I heard a joke that on Twitter that Cyberpunk, without the inherent anti-corporate and anti-governmental themes, should be just called neon liberal.
Ha, that's hilarious.
Because that's basically all it is. It's neoliberalism just with a like futuristic neon aesthetic.
Now, our source for most of the information about this is an article written on the development of this game by Jason Schreier?
I thought it was pronounced Schreier.
Schreier. Oh, there'll be a link in the description of the video. And then I can't help but also mention that Jim Sterling did several videos on Cyberpunk, including predicting this shit show and saying that Cyberpunk should be delayed because of this.
All right, trigger warnings for language and transphobia and sexual discussion.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you want some more content about this, Jim Sterling did a pretty entertaining videos about this, but this is just...
Yeah, they were completely spot on with their predictions.
Yeah. But this is just going to be, like, our going over it. So, do you want to start?
Yeah.
Or do you think I should?
You start. Well, let's just talk about these issues one by one as they come up.
All right. Well, we want to start with the announcement of the game.
Oh, wait, no. We should back up from that. We should talk about The Witcher.
Oh, right, you're right, you're right. I'll talk about it since I've actually played some of it.
Well, let me just set the stage. So, the company that made Cyberpunk 2077 is the same company that made the Witcher series of video games, based off of the Witcher book series.
Mm-hmm.
And this company is called CD Projekt Red. Because of the critical acclaim and success of The Witcher 3, they were hailed as like a monumental game studio. A lot of people think of game developers like they think of friends, you know? They have best friends, good friends, close friends, betrayed friends, enemies, you know? EA is seen as like the worst video game developer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like Activision's just a titan, you love it or you hate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but CD Projekt Red was seen as like the antithesis to EA and Activision in that it was, you know, good writing and supposed to be really well done and like they cared about their games.
For our listeners that are not really into like the gamer community and are more politically inclined, it's effectively the gamer equivalent of like standing for China or the Soviet Union or North Korea. It's the kind of thing where like CD Projekt Red wasn't an indie company. They were a big game developing studio. And they were owned by some big, you know, multi-corps and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. As most game devs are, right? Mm-hmm. It's just they weren't an American one. They weren't a familiar one. They were something new, an alternative idea. Like how like China provides an alternative to capitalism called state capitalism. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's kind of the idea. Not to get don't hate any people that identify as gamers for some reason that still listen to us. Don't get scared off by the politics. Don't worry, we've only just started.
So anyway, yeah, they were coming off the success of The Witcher 3.
Oh, did you want to talk about why The Witcher was good or anything?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about it. Look, personally, yes, the writing in The Witcher 3 was really good. Gameplay was really good. The stories and the quests were really good. Awesome. I couldn't identify with the main character, Gerald.
Well,
the second there was a bath scene where he was in a tub getting bathed by maidens, I was just like, I'm out.
Okay, I mean, fair enough, but it wasn't made for you.
Yeah,
obviously.
I know.
I mean, you're a Latina woman, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard to get a game made for you. Now, if you're a middle-aged white guy, there's so many out there, including The Witcher. However, I think it was probably one of the better cases. There's a channel called Curio that has a 4-part analysis on the main character, Geralt, indicating that there's enough depth to this character that he might actually be a really good example of masculinity, or at least the ways in which he's flawed are portrayed as flaws.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I just personally I like games where you can customize your character.
Well, that's just not the game The Witcher was, though.
Yeah, and also, come on, he was such an obvious ladies' man, and I was just like,
well, okay, look,
I couldn't help but roll my eyes with that stuff.
There was a fair amount of sexism in the game. It wasn't perfect. No one claimed it was perfect. In fact, I don't like the fantasy genre because of how often it has sexist or racist or even kind of fashy-leaning themes. Mm-hmm. You know, I just... Particularly when I say fantasy, I mean the medieval European type of aesthetic. Mm-hmm. I think fantasy can be so much more than that. And I've said this before, and that's why I never really cared about The Witcher. That's why I was so excited about Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah, because
sorry.
Yeah, you were excited because you felt like CD Projekt Red had done good writing with The Witcher, and so you felt like taking that into a science fiction world would mean that you could enjoy their good writing.
Well, not just that, but they wouldn't be held down by the baggage of fantasy tropes. Mm-hmm. In science fiction, while there are tropes, I feel like there's a significant more amount of freedom that you're allowed to do. Well, in fantasy, you might have like literal magic, so you're not restrained by like the laws of physics. You're restrained by like tropes and ideas and what fits fantasy, right? Mm-hmm. In science fiction, I feel basically, it's just the laws of physics. Even those are very malleable with technology,
Yeah.
And that's why they tend to be more progressive. You tend to have a lot more representation of all different types of groups. I mean, literally, it's why in Cyberpunk 2077 you can create your own character, because your character could come from many backgrounds, as opposed to The Witcher, where you had to be a big tough white guy who had a dark past.
Yeah. So yeah, so when they announced it in 2012.
That was so long ago.
I know, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, for the record, if a game is in development for over 8 years, that is bad.
They did not work on it for those 8 years.
Well, okay, fair enough. But my point is that game development is supposed to be quick. And, I'm not saying, you should do crunch. We'll get into that, right? But the longer it takes to make the game, the more, millions or billions of dollars you have to make for it to be profitable.
Oh, yeah, true.
Look at BioShock Infinite. I think it's a great example of this. BioShock Infinite took 5 years to make.
Mm-hmm.
And it took so long to make, and they were actively developing for most of that time, that even though it was a huge seller, it wasn't enough to recoup the costs, and the company went under.
Oh, wow, yeah.
That's why
that sucks.
Yeah, that's why we don't have another BioShock.
That's sad. BioShock was a really cool world.
Yeah, but and then you have games like for example Fallout 4, right? Mm-hmm. They claimed it was 7 years, but it obviously wasn't. They obviously only worked on it for 2 years, so that's why they didn't go under. That's why they made Fallout 76. So with Cyberpunk 2077, they probably didn't work on it for all 8 years.
Oh no, they did not. I was about to get into that.
Oh, okay. I guess I'll hold off my judgment until you tell me.
Yeah, full development of the game didn't start until 2016.
That makes sense, but that's still 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, true. But yeah, it didn't start until 2016, and they announced it in 2012.
And, 4 to 5 years of actual full development. They announced it earlier. So still, that means that they definitely needed to make a ton of money off of this game in order for it to be profitable.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I'm not sure you understand this, but let me explain the start of the development of the game. All right, so full development started in 2016. Before that, though, and during full development, they were working on the engine at the same time as they developed the game.
Oh, that could cause problems.
Yeah, in the article, they literally described it as trying to run a train while tracks were being laid in front of you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, in case anyone doesn't understand, the engine is basically what is used to develop the game. So, for example, if you're talking a Bethesda game, you're talking they were developing the GEC or the construction kit at the same time as they were working in it to make the game.
Well, think of it like you're creating the laws of physics while you're also trying to run a marathon.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that's part of what a different studio head took over full development once it started, and they changed a lot of the pre-production decisions that they had made. Literally changing so much that they changed the perspective from third to first person.
Okay, so this is I think going to be a recurring problem with Cyberpunk, right? In its development. And this is something that is so common, so unfortunately common, where basically the big executives, the rich money people, try to get their hands into the mess of the developers and just make everything worse because they don't know what they're doing. Their only bottom line is to please shareholders and capital and whatnot. So they do whatever they think is going to accomplish that. And I think, as we know, just look at the GameStop story recently. It turns out a lot of rich people don't know what they're doing.
Well, yes, but to be fair, you don't know how much in development this guy was involved.
Well, my concern, because I've been there, I've been the creative person in the team, where all of a sudden a new head was brought onto the project, and they decided to completely change direction, and we end up having to redo half of our work.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Several staff members who worked on
Also, I just want to say, they changed it to first person because of Call of Duty, because of first person shooters.
Because it was going to be a shooter.
Yeah,
Unlike The Witcher 3, which was...
They saw Bethesda go like, Fallout 3? RPG with some first person mechanics. But you remember how they switched to Fallout 4 and they made it a first person shooter first and an RPG second? Yeah, well, Bethesda seems like the perfect company to emulate, right? We're going to do that with The Witcher to Cyberpunk.
Wow.
That's not going to backfire at all.
Okay, I wanted to say several top developers who worked on The Witcher 3 disagreed with those changes to Cyberpunk 2077 and left the studio. So a lot of their top talent that worked on The Witcher 3 ended up leaving.
And you know why that's so messed up? In the game industry, there's this common practice that a lot of companies do, a lot of the big ones, where they will not put your name on the credits of the game unless you worked until the day of shipping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the people, these devs that you're saying left, I would be willing to bet that their names are not in the credits because that's supposed to be a punishment.
Yeah, I know.
For abandoning the ship, even when the captain's driving it into an iceberg.
Yep. In 2018, they released a demo at E3, which was almost entirely cinematic and included no actual gameplay.
It was a cool cinema trailer, though.
Yes, but it was entirely faked.
This is the
even the supposed gameplay you saw, that was fake.
This is the one with the android woman, right?
No. Actually.
Oh, that was the earlier one. Oh, was this the dumb one with the guy being all moody and crap?
I think so, yeah.
Oh.
Because it looked, it was a mission. It looked like it was actual gameplay, but it wasn't.
Again, this is a common practice. This is why we wanted to talk about this. Cyberpunk, CG Projekt Red is not the only company that does this. They just did it more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they did, all of the corrupt game dev practices in one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But yeah, okay, look, there's nothing wrong with cinematic trailers. There's nothing wrong with it.
Just don't pretend it's like their gameplay.
Yeah, that's why people hate them, because people have had to come to terms with the fact that a lot of game companies pass off their cinematic trailers as gameplay trailers. Mm-hmm. There's just no reason for that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, it's to deceive them and to hope make them think the game's gonna be better and to get them to buy it. That's the reason. I just meant it wasn't a good one.
Yeah. There's a little quip in the article about how the months spent making this trailer would have been better spent working on the game.
Most game companies only spend a single month on the demo trailer.
It was longer than that, I
Of
think.
course it was. Of course it was.
I'm pretty sure it was.
I don't know, they literally have to segregate a separate team. Okay,
yeah.
We're almost at shipping or something, although this was still a few years out, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, they're like, E3's coming up, so you half of the team, you keep working on the game. You other half, you make the fake trailer because the game's not ready yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing was, yes, it was a few years before it was going to be released, but before they wanted it released. And, it wasn't that long before they wanted it released.
Oh, because it kept getting pushed back.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, you remember when, and I think this was an article or something that came out.
For what it's worth, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but pushing the deadline back, I would not classify as one of the egregious practices.
No, if you need more time, push it back. I know it'll cut into your profits, but you'll have more profits if it's a better game.
Yeah, it's literally a scenario of do you want to cut into your profits now, or do you want to cut into your profits later when the game flops? Mm-hmm. Or I got it
Look,
mixed up.
initial release, they're gonna sell.
I mean, look, I don't hold Shigeru Miyamoto as some type of god like some people do, but he had one quote that I thought was pretty wise, and that quote was a delayed game can become good eventually. A rushed game is bad forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like,
Although
look,
that was before patching.
yeah. But, like, look, initial release, yeah, sure, you're gonna sell a bunch of copies from the hype and stuff. But if you want to keep selling copies, if you want to keep making some money after after the initial release, people are gonna find out that it sucks and not buy it after that. And yes, I know video games make most of their money on initial release, but come on.
Yeah, at that point, it's like almost kind of like a con where you are trying to get as many people to buy it up front without them actually playing it, because then once they play it, they're not going to spread word of mouth.
Yeah.
There's not going to be any good press.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I mean, we'll get to that when we talk about embargo, so let's just move on.
Yeah. So I don't know if you heard about this, but the CD Projekt Red said that there wouldn't be crunch on Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons people held them up as like an amazing studio. Like, look, they don't even do crunch.
Yeah, they lied.
Yeah.
They emotionally manipulated their workers into working late hours by saying, oh, well, your coworkers will have to pick up your slack if you're not going to work extra.
I've worked at places that do that. It's awful. It's like, just have the guts to tell me that you want me to work late. Mm-hmm. Do that or don't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I've been in situations before, literally, where I wanted to play hardball. You know, I wanted to be like, look, if you're not going to tell me I need to work late, I have a life. I'm going to go, right? Mm-hmm. And then the boss says something that's like, well, this might affect your performance, your review, if you don't show you're a team player. Mm-hmm. And so that I get the message like, oh, I will be fired if I don't do this. I guess I have to.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say this real quick. In the article, they mentioned that some people lost their families over the 13-hour days they had to work and stuff like that. And at least one developer quit shortly after they got married after watching people lose their families from working so much.
It's so awful because I so badly would have wanted to work for a company like that. I literally have applied to work at CD Projekt Red.
Yeah.
But you see that happening and it's just like, get out. Just get out. But it's so sad because how many of those people dreamt of working there?
Yeah, it is really sad. All right. So in June of 2019, it was announced that the game would be released on April 16th of 2020. And the developers on the game started making memes and jokes about it getting delayed because there was no way the game was going to be done by then. They figured that the game could possibly be done by 2022.
And that was their estimate in 2020 or 2019, sorry.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
I mean, they would know more than any of the higher ups. Because they're the ones actually working on it.
Yep.
And I mean, we'll talk about crunch, but like, if you if you really have to get it out by that date, guess what? Guess what's the one thing you have that no one else does? Money. Throw money at the situation. Crunch is not throwing money at it. Because the whole point of crunch is you're squeezing as much work for as little money as possible. Because
they're salaried, and 9 times out of 10, that means that they've agreed not to be paid overtime.
Exactly. I mean, paying overtime is the minimal, the least you can do. Like, far more than that, just hire more people. Mm-hmm. If you got to get this game out in a year, wow, your developers are saying it's going to take an extra 2 years. Sounds like you need to literally triple your staff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we're going to talk about their staff. Okay, we need to get going.
Sorry.
All right. So at the time of the announcement of its release date in June of 2019, a marketing campaign began with a poster of a trans woman with a large, bulging dick advertising a drink. It was the Mix It Up poster.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah. You want to talk about why that was controversial?
We will get into why it's controversial later.
Why later and not now?
Well, because when the game came out, you know what? I'm just gonna say it now. When the game came out, people realized that there were barely any actual trans characters in the game.
Yes, the character on this poster, this advertisement in the world of Cyberpunk, was also used as advertising material for the game itself, and this constitutes the sole trans character.
I think there were like 2.
Okay, one of 3.
Whatever.
Yeah. And so, okay. So first of all, having a sexual graphic is not bad. Having a trans character is not bad. Having a sexual trans character is not bad, right? The reason it's bad, though, is that you had such little representation of actual trans characters. At the time this marketing material was released, we could have hoped for real trans characters.
There was also criticism that this poster was fetishistic of trans women.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. Because trans people exist in more ways than the stereotypically attractive woman with, the large breasts and skinny waist, but with a phallus.
Well, it's not even just that. It's you're reducing trans people to their genitalia.
Well,
and there's more evidence to suggest that, because in character creation, your gender is determined by your voice, and there isn't even a non-binary option.
Right, and I was planning on getting to that, but I don't think that's necessarily related to the marketing poster itself.
I see.
I think that's just revealing of their level of ignorance about who trans people even are.
Well, yes, there were also a couple transphobic tweets by CD Projekt Red.
Right, this poster was basically just a red flag early on. It wasn't necessarily horrible, but one of the reasons it was particularly awful was that it was a very obvious cis woman playing a trans character with like a fake thing down there. Like, it didn't look like an actual trans woman. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I will say that immediately trans people were uncomfortable with this and said that it was fetishistic.
I mean,
to be honest,
she doesn't even have testicles.
Well, that doesn't matter. What do you mean?
Well, I'm sorry if this sounds ignorant, but wouldn't a person that was assigned male at birth and transitioned to become a woman likely have testicles?
I mean, yes, but that's not the point of this. The point is that...
No, well, my point is it's an unrealistic representation.
Oh, absolutely. But it's not even just that it's unrealistic. It's focusing on that fantasy of a trans girl with a huge dick. Basically, of like... it's a literal porn category, Right,
yeah. But see, that's why I think it might have been passable. Because maybe it was literally a poster advertising like pornographic content within the world.
It was advertising a drink, first of all.
Okay, but still, you could have a cyberpunk world with the idea that like maybe the corporations have grown so shameless with their advertising, right? That like everything's sexual. Like, I don't know, a sexist Burger King ad that shows like a model eating a Burger King sandwich. That's like a real thing from the real world.
Yes.
So like, my point is, it could have made sense within the game world, but then they decided to use that as marketing material in the real world to sell a video game.
Well, yes, but it's not just that. It's just that the people who a lot of people who like this poster and think it looks good or whatever aren't thinking about trans people as people. It's literally just like, okay. So you know how men would look at that advertisement of a sexy woman eating a burger and be like, that's a sexy woman, and, fetishize her and see her as an object?
Yeah.
It's the same thing, except with a trans woman instead of a cis woman. You're looking at the person as an object.
Yes, but my argument is that there could have been a level of self-awareness, irony, or satire, and that, like, all people on capitalist posters are being objectified.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. And I believe that's what they thought about when they made it.
Well, no,
But-
I think what you're talking about with later transphobia that appeared in the game, that ended up brushing those arguments aside, and it's just, oh no, CG Projekt Red is transphobic.
Yeah, I get what you mean. All right, we need to move on. I know you don't know about this, but the number of the developers of the studio doubled for this project compared to The Witcher 3. And they had never managed a team of this size before.
Oh, so again, another management problem. They don't know how to manage a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just that. 500 people or around there is still not enough to make a game of this size. Because they talked about wanting to make a game like Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2.
Well, how many people made Grand Theft Auto 5?
Thousands.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. So literally, they wanted to make a game of this scale with less than half the amount of people that it would require. That was another huge issue.
Wow.
Yep. And of course, eventually the game was delayed. But, hold on. Sorry. Management insisted that the game had to be out before the next-gen consoles were even announced, so that the company could make more money by releasing new versions of the game for those next-gen consoles.
I mean, it makes sense from a capitalist perspective. The thing is, if you really wanted to be out by that time, you need to throw money at it. It's literally like, look, we could sell our game twice and make double the money. Okay, but you realize in order to make that deadline, you might have to put a bit more money in, huh?
Mm-hmm, yeah. And of course, management continuously made excuses when developers were like, there's no way we're getting it out at this time. And they did that thing of, well, we made The Witcher 3, so if we can make The Witcher 3, then we can do it. And it's just ridiculous. You've heard about that before,
Oh,
right?
yeah, but like, everyone knew about that in general. Like, they were banking on The Witcher's success. What was really astonishing was hearing that was a line used against their own employees. As if their employees didn't know exactly what had gone into making The Witcher. It's like, yeah, many of us were there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how much crunch was or was not in The Witcher, but let's say crunch was in The Witcher. Just because it works once, you just got lucky. Like, right?
Yeah, exactly. Not to mention the fact that they were developing for twice the amount of consoles that they were when The Witcher was out.
Also, I think The Witcher probably had like a more narrowed scope. I mean, I don't know a lot of how much there is in it, but like you're literally basing it off of pre-written material, books.
That too.
And
you didn't have to write all your own material.
And you're playing as a preset character.
Yeah, true. But yeah. And of course, the game was delayed several more times. And finally, the eventual release date they decided upon approached. But all of the developers knew the game was barely finished and that bugs were still being discovered. It turns out that most of the staff could only test the game on their home computers, as they had to stay home in the beginning of March 2020 when the pandemic began. And they just...
Oh no, so this has been management problem after management problem after management problem. And then the coronavirus pandemic hits, and they have to work remotely, and management are probably a bunch of boomers that, like, go home at night and fantasize about how awesome it is to keep their employees hostage in a building with them. And they probably, like, everything probably goes to even more to crap than it did before.
Yes, it absolutely did. It was known there were performance issues on the console versions and many bugs existing, but all of it was ignored the second it became time of, like, we need to start getting this game onto disc or we're not going to get it out in time.
For the record, I do want to say that, like, literally doing a more remote business model where you're not forcing everyone to come into the same building is literally more efficient.
More cost efficient, too.
Yes, but also you get more work done.
Yeah.
You just don't have as much power and control over your employees, which is why people like management hate it and they try to erode it as much as possible. And they end up wasting effort and efficiency doing that.
I am crossing my fingers that you get to keep working from home after this is over.
And it's a weird capitalism thing where because you're right, literally cost wise, it is more efficient. So is the capitalism, like the free market or whatever, going to win out and they're going to let us keep working from home because it's more cost effective? Or is their desire for greed, power, and control going to win out, bleep the free market, and they're going to make us go back to work?
I really hope they just let you keep working from home. I would love that.
We'll see. Turns out a lot of capitalists don't even know how to play the game.
Yep.
Again, the GameStop thing. Literally, the moment the free market works against them, no, we need regulation now. Now of all times. Are you kidding me?
Yep. The reviewers were only allowed to play the PC version, and they had to get the footage approved before they released it.
So this is what I was talking about, with reviewer embargoes and whatnot. This is a common practice, but Cyberpunk was particularly egregious about it, where, Gamergate, that whole thing, we should really do a deep dive into that. A wide look into it sometime. Mm-hmm. But Gamergate was supposedly about, game ethics in journalism, right? Mm-hmm. And it was all a front for a bunch of sexist attacks, but part of the reason it was able to get so much support is because there actually are legitimate concerns to have with game journalism.
Absolutely.
Particularly, not what they were saying, but one of the largest concerns is the ties that different journalist company outlets, like game reporting outlets, have with the very game companies that they're supposed to be reporting on. Mm-hmm. So we have a situation like this where CD Projekt Red straight up tells the reviewers, "Oh, you can do this, you can't do that. Give our game nice big happy face, don't give our game frowny face. Also, we're not going to show you or tell you about the frowny face places." Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and the whole goal is, like I said earlier, a con. It's a scam. It's a scam to get the game out the door, since 90% of people who ever buy it will be buying it in the days following launch, especially if the game is bad, right? Mm-hmm. That means when they launch it, and the only reviews are from people that had the luxury of being able to play it before the game came out, people will buy it based on those reviews, and then when they play it and find out it's garbage, well, too bad. You've already bought it. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are return procedures in place, but statistically, only a fraction of people do that.
Yep.
So it's just totally scummy, because those just aren't honest reviews. And I don't want to give crap to individual journalists. Journalists are journalism is a very integral profession. Though there are journalists that do compromise and concede on these matters. Mm-hmm. We like Jim Sterling because they don't.
Yeah.
But point is, the system is kind of rigged, because good luck getting an early copy if you don't kiss up to the companies.
Yep. And the game was released December 10th of 2020. And people bought it and then realized it was a buggy, unplayable mess, and shit hit the fan.
Yeah, there were so many things wrong with it. I mean, we already talked about a lot of the transphobia. Mm-hmm.
The first thing we should actually talk about, this isn't in the right order. I really want to talk about this first. There was a sequence in the game that was seizure-inducing. That was literally uncannily similar to what doctors use to induce seizures in patients.
Like it was literally developed based on that as reference, yes.
Yes, exactly. And they put a seizure warning in the EULA with the same EULA. What?
Do not give them that much credit, because people are there is no seizure warning in the game. People say, "Oh, well, there is a seizure warning in the terms of service, the EULA, whatever you want to call it."
The same one that has a joke at the very top of it about how people don't read EULAs.
The same one that's literally not enforceable in court. I don't know why people act like terms of service are enforceable in court. They're just not. It's not like a contract that you actually like read and formally sign to. You do a checkbox that doesn't have the same legal power. Now, it's not to say that it's zero, okay? It's not to say it's unenforceable.
It's just literally never been challenged in court.
Yes, because they hope to scare you off on it. And there could be one day where someone challenges terms of services and finds out that they're basically bunk. Now, maybe with this administration, we shouldn't try that.
We probably shouldn't, no.
Maybe if we had done that during the Obama era, we would have had better luck. Maybe not. Who knows? So yeah, I don't give him that credit. There was no seizure warning in the game because no person who played the game would have reasonably known to look out for that.
Yes. And there was a games journalist who posted a warning, a seizure warning on Twitter about this, about it in the game. And she was harassed and literally sent videos that were made to induce seizures.
Which you might know as legally defined assault. Like, you can be jailed for that.
Yep. And, of course, CDPR did nothing about this. They didn't even release a statement.
Well, they patched the game to have a seizure warning.
But they didn't say anything about this woman who was being harassed for literally putting up a seizure warning.
Yeah, and she actually liked the game.
Yeah. She just
didn't like having a seizure.
Yeah, she just literally had a seizure while playing it.
Also, check out Laura Kate Dale. She is a great journalist that talks about the accessibility of various games, including Cyberpunk 2077, and talks about where it does succeed, but also where it fails at making the game accessible to disabled players.
Yes, and she talks about the seizure thing.
Yeah, you can't not talk about it.
Yeah,
right?
They did introduce a setting to skip the sequence entirely for people who know they're epileptic and wouldn't be able to go through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did that after the person had the seizure.
After people had seizures. Yeah. The game was so buggy and unfinished that they literally took it down from the PlayStation Store, and Sony had to issue refunds, which has never happened before.
Right, but I mean, there's a bit of intricacy to that. So we talked about how statistically only a fraction of people return the game. Mm-hmm. The game was so buggy. Like, okay, you know what? Let me just take a step aside. We need to talk about the transphobia. Mm-hmm. So we talked about how there were warning signs about transphobia, right?
Yeah.
Turns out it was a lot worse than that. There are very few, almost none, trans characters in the game. Right? Mm-hmm. And then in the character creation system, even though you're given so many options, like you can literally edit your genitalia, right? Mm-hmm. It ties voice pitch to gender. Mm-hmm. So you can be a man with, with the opposite genitalia, or you can be like a woman with a phallus, right? Mm-hmm. But you can't have a deep voice and be considered a woman. Mm-hmm. And you can't have a higher pitched voice and be considered a man. And not only that, there's no non-binary option.
Mm-hmm. And see, the issue with this is that, yeah, some trans women have deep voices, and they should be able to be represented in this.
Not even trans women. Some cis women do. I mean, no offense.
Yeah, obviously.
No offense, Kira, but your voice isn't the highest pitch.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I mean, my voice might be a little bit higher pitched than your average cis man.
Yeah.
Particularly when I'm getting concerned like this.
But yeah, so it's ridiculous to tie gender to voice. And they did it because they only wanted to do a certain amount of voices, and they wanted to tie pronouns to those voices.
Well, people have made so many excuses. Like, what? You expect them to revoice the game? No, just don't have the limitation. Don't tie it to this. There's no reason for that. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, there really isn't.
Like, some games just literally voice the NPCs in such a way that they avoid using pronouns, right?
Yeah, so that you can be whatever character you want to be, and they just won't use your pronouns.
Exactly. Which means
they'll only use them in written form where they can make it switch out pronouns on demand.
Or they just use they.
Yeah.
They works for, like, almost all situations.
Yep.
Like, they has been in use since, like, the Shakespearean era. You can find they in Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. As a pronoun, because it's always been one.
Yeah.
You use it for a group of people or even an individual whose gender is not known.
Yeah, exactly.
So a non-binary option could have been perfectly feasible. And if that really means that they had to make a third dialogue track instead of just the two, the man and woman, the high pitch and the low voice or whatever, fine, who cares? Right? The thing that's so disappointing about it is, and we talked about this in one of our past episodes, our first episode where we discovered gender. And while we were a bit naive at the time, obviously, I mean, we had more ideas than Cyberpunk does.
Yeah.
Where, like, why does gender have to be so binary in the game, right? Like, why not have, like, an actual spectrum,
Yeah,
why not have a bunch of spectrums and meters and things that can interlock? Why not let the player determine what gender even means to their character? Like, the whole game could not give a crap about gender.
Yeah.
Like, this is supposed to be cyberpunk. Not only, like, are you supposed to have, like, been technologically beyond this point? Like, it's not even like trans in the sense of like assigned male at birth or assigned female at birth. No, this is cyberpunk. You could literally have just a cis woman that goes like, hey, I want a surgery and have a phallus now. It's cyberpunk. You can do that, Like, there are so many possibilities that they couldn't even begin to explore because they wanted to limit what the idea of gender even was.
Yep. It's ridiculous. It's awful.
Honestly, and you know what? This isn't exactly transphobic, but why is there only, like, phalluses and, the more feminine type of genitalia?
Why
isn't there, like, new genitalia? Why don't you have, like, a little buzzsaw down there, Like, or, like, ooh, I know, like, a plug and you can, like, swap things out. This is cyberpunk!
Also, intersex people exist.
Well, I mean, obviously, you should have the option to just, like, say all of the above.
Yeah, exactly. It's, like, literally, it is cyberpunk. Why not just run with that and let people do whatever they want? Why? Why not?
A lack of imagination.
Yep.
It probably, literally, didn't even occur to anyone that had the power to make this decision.
Absolutely. You're definitely right.
So all this transphobia nonsense, right, and all this disappointment and just creative potential wasn't enough to get the gamers to be upset about this. But the bugs affect them. The bugs affect everyone.
Yep.
So the game was so buggy, so unplayable. There's so many hilarious videos out there of the game just being, like, completely unplayable because of how buggy and horrible it is. Like the cars on the street don't even have AI. They're just on tracks. Meaning that you can, like, mess with them in so many horrible ways.
Yeah, there are by the way, there are literally a list of features that they've made that, like, they promised when it first came out, like, that aren't in there, like car ambushes and stuff.
And there's, like, situations where you can see, like, the same NPC hanging out with two copies of themselves, stuff like that. So there's a lot of issues, and those even the gamers couldn't avoid. So everyone is upset about this game, or has been. I know we're kind of talking about the story a bit late, obviously. A lot's been going on. Please give us a break.
Yeah.
But, so even they couldn't do it. So statistically, a certain fraction of people return the game. This was an outlier case. So many people were returning the game that Sony, on their PlayStation Store, was, like, hemorrhaging money. Because so many people were returning them, they were losing money. So they instead of, like, saying you can't return the money or return the game and get your money back, that would have been a very poor move on their part. They took an even more drastic option and said, okay, well, you can't buy it from us anymore. If you want to return the copy you've got, whatever. We already sold it to you. That's your right or whatever. So we're going to allow that. But we're not selling the game anymore because we know there's, like, a 9 out of 10 chance you're going to come return it.
Yeah. Yep.
And yeah, that was a huge loss to CD Projekt Red. They haven't talked about their numbers because, quite frankly, game companies only talk about their sales numbers when they've done well. Because they're not required to give out the information in most countries.
Yep.
So CD Projekt Red has not said very much about how their sales have gone. I'm wagering they took a massive loss. I was already wagering they might take a massive loss because of all the crap they pulled, but it didn't seem to be enough. But when you had the bugs and you had Sony pulling it, I think it's basically guaranteed.
There would have been articles by now about how much of a success it was, if it was.
Like, I remember, like, Fallout 4 was a horrible game, but it worked, you know, like, it was playable. And so they didn't take a huge, massive loss until the next game came out. And I still think that principle applies. When you make a bad game, you can still, like, con people into making it sell well. But people will remember that, and that will affect your next game. Cyberpunk did so bad, they didn't have to wait till the next game.
Yeah.
The game was so unplayable that they tanked it immediately.
Yep.
All right, I've been talking for a bit. I'll let you go. Sorry.
No, it's fine. So, yeah, I definitely think that if they had good sales numbers, you'd be hearing about it by now. Because you know all those articles when games come out about, like, oh, it broke sales records or made this much in its first day when it came out. And there hasn't been any of that for Cyberpunk 2077. Not a single article talking about its sales numbers. And there's a reason for that, because it probably did a lot shittier than they thought it would.
Yep.
And honestly, I'm kind of glad it didn't do well, because maybe people will learn from this.
Well, I saw this thing online that I thought was a really good take. And what they were basically saying was, some people are going around thinking that, well, they tried to use that excessive crunch as much as they could, but it just wasn't enough, right? And that implies that excessive crunch failed to make the game good. When in reality, the excessive crunch made the game worse.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because they could have just straight up cut out features and stuff, delivered a more manageable product, right, by the deadline, and avoided crunch. Many games do. Hades, that's a big game that's out these days. They don't do crunch at all. They literally have a policy against it. I forget what the studio's called. I think it's a co-op studio.
I don't know.
I forgot, sorry. Hades, look up the game, it's cool. Disco Elysium also.
Yeah.
There's better games to play, particularly I think in the cyberpunk genre.
Yeah.
Since, you know, this is such a bad cyberpunk game. I don't play a lot of cyberpunk myself, to be honest.
I don't either.
I know Valhalla is a cool one, though.
Yeah, true.
I like that one.
Gosh, what's that website that has indie games? It's itch.io? Were they the ones that did that cyberpunk bundle from LGBT creators?
I don't know.
Just Google cyberpunk bundle from LGBT creators and you might be able to find it if it's still up. We bought that. It's really cool. Please support that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's just the real losers here aren't the game players, because it's just a game that you were disappointed to get. You can return it and get your money back. Like, I guess we do kind of lose, but not nearly as bad as the developers that were forced to go on a crunch for years, being told, like, oh, it'll be worth it. You'll get your name on the credits. It'll be the biggest game ever. It'll be the next Grand Theft Auto 5. It'll be the next Witcher 3. And your careers are going to be made. You just have to be our literal slaves for 5 years. And this happens.
Well, it's not just this. I read in the article that CDPR has a profit-sharing thing with their employees, and so they're not going to get much money from that either.
It's like a stock thing?
No, it's a profit-sharing thing, so they get money, depending on how much it sells. So,
it's like an incentive bonus kind of thing.
Yeah, so they're not going to get much money from this because the game didn't sell well.
So they
won't even get paid as much as they were expecting.
Well, look, we can talk about the financial stuff. It's garbage. Imagine all the people that got burned out and couldn't go all the way to the end. I do not blame them whatsoever.
Yeah.
And all the people that push through to the end and they get squat, like, not even just like on a financial level, but like literally on like a philosophical level, you know, the fact that you gave so much of your life, your finite human existence, during a pandemic, no less. I wonder how many of their employees died of the pandemic, you know?
Yeah.
Statistically, some percentage of them had to have.
Mm-hmm.
So you gave your life for this. And you might have told yourself, like, well, this game is going to be amazing. I love Cyberpunk. I love RPGs. The Witcher was horrible to go through, but it resulted in a great game to play, right? People loved that game. My work will be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to remember Cyberpunk 2077?
Yeah.
No one in the year 2077 will.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Partially because that's the year the bombs are going to drop.
Yeah, I mean, in 2077, people are going to, you know, if we saw this climate change thing, people are going to be making jokes about, like, the Fallout universe. They're not going to remember what Cyberpunk 2077 was. They'll remember some other game where 2077 is a footnote.
Yeah.
I guess we've said all we had to say about it. If you want to play the game, we just think it's not a good idea to contribute money to this company. That's all we'll say.
Yep.
And try out those other games we mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, this has been Game Theorem. We have a Twitter account, Game Theorems.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Kira.
Bye.
Bye.